Hello and welcome to the Cancer Education Series brought to you by MercyOne and Above and Beyond Cancer. This series is made possible thanks to a grant from the Iowa Cancer Consortium. My name is Chris Goodale and I'm the Executive Director of Above and Beyond Cancer. It's always my weekly pleasure to introduce the founder of our organization, Dr. Dick Deming, who will introduce our speaker for this evening. Dr. Deming?
Great. Thank you, Chris, and welcome everyone, those especially watching live. Some of you might be watching this in the future as a taped event, but just so you know, we're doing this live on December 30th. The year is winding down, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. And we're really going to do a conversation rather than an actual talk with a PowerPoint. And our guest tonight is Joan Bindel. And Joan is a colleague of mine here at MercyOne. Joan went to high school in Dyersville at Beckman Catholic High, and she has 2 undergraduate degrees. One is from AIB, and one is from, I've already forgotten, Joan, where's your second?
Graceland University.
Graceland in Lamoni. And then
Yes.
she has a master's degree from Drake. And she currently is the Senior Director of Development at the Mercy Foundation. She's had over a 25-year career doing various things in the community, at the diocese, and at Mercy. And it's really just a pleasure to work with Joan. We've asked her to speak tonight about estate planning, and it's really called A Gift to Your Family. And before we start, Joan, our conversation, I just want to share a poem, a blessing really, with the group. Again, it's the end of the year, and this is a blessing from one of my favorite writers, John O'Donohue, from his book, To Bless the Space Between Us. And it's a blessing called At the End of the Year. As this year draws to its end, we give thanks for the gifts it's brought and how they became inlaid within, where neither time nor tide can touch them. Surprises that came awake in forgotten corners of old fields where expectations seemed to have quenched. The darkened days that stopped the confidence of dawn. Days when beloved faces shone brighter, when light from beyond themselves, and from the granite of some secret sorrow, a stream of buried tears loosened. We bless this year for all we learned, for all we loved and lost, and for the quiet way it brought us nearer to our invisible destinations. So the end of the year reminds us that we are cycles, and that all of us, whether we've ever had cancer or not, will ultimately come to the end of our life here on earth. And the end of the year is always a great time to reflect on the past year, but also to think about the legacy that we're creating. And tonight, the conversation that Joan and I are going to have is really about the legacy that we can give to those who stay behind us as we're on our way out of this life. And Joan, what did those words in the reflection, what did it make you think of here as we're approaching the last day of the year?
Well, just reflecting on the past year and all that we've been through and the things that we have to look forward to in the coming year, I kept thinking how perfect of a reflection it is for our conversation tonight, because we can reflect on all of the things that are good in our life and yet have so much to look forward to in the future. And, making sure that we're sharing that with others is also important.
So Joan, as we talk about a gift to your family, estate planning conversation, what are some of the topics that we're going to touch on this evening?
Well, tonight I primarily want to touch on having conversations with your family. I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges that people face when they're thinking about their end of life or what their next chapter looks like, and then how we plan for what we're going to do with what we spent a lifetime accumulating, a lifetime building. And I often say people spend more time planning weddings and birthday parties and holidays than they do thinking about what they've worked all their life for and what they want their legacy to be. And so tonight, I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about some of my own experiences, and then really some steps on what can we do to get started.
Yeah. So I think what we're going to talk about is really how we, as we approach our end of life, some things that we can do that will really help our family. Are going to have to make all sorts of decisions, whether it's about codes or feeding tubes, or whether it's about funerals or what to do with the ashes. And then we're also going to touch on a bit about the legacy that lives beyond us, the legacy of the wisdom we've passed on, but also what we may want to do to be helpful to those individuals and organizations that we want to support even after our death.
Absolutely.
So maybe share with us a little bit of an experience that you had recently where a friend of yours asked you to help her with her end of life journey.
Yeah, so last October, a dear friend of mine passed away. We'd been friends for 30 years. She had no family that she had family. She was estranged from her family, and no children, no spouse. We'd been friends for a long time, and she'd been in and out of the hospital. I was her durable power of attorney through that time, cared for her, was her caretaker. And as her health declined, she would often say to me, I'm going to write this down for you. If anything ever happens to me, there's going to be a book for you on my desk. And I'm thinking, what book, what desk? So sadly, the evening that she passed and I was in her home, I was faced with a lot of questions right away from the emergency personnel. You know, what is her name? Do you have her driver's license? What is her social security number? And panic starts to set in. And I remembered the book. And so I went back to her desk and I found this. So she doesn't have family. It was clearly her book. I treasure this book for many reasons. Number one, it has her handwriting in it. Number two, it was a lifesaver. And for me, it helped me walk through many days of technical things. And one of the hardest decisions I had to make, when you mentioned earlier, you know, what do we do at the end of our life? Where do we want to be buried? What do we want? Well, we had never talked about that, and I hadn't found it in the book until I went looking further, and I was this close to purchasing a burial plot. I knew she wanted to be cremated, and I find this note. Don't put me in the ground. Scatter my ashes with dolphins or whales. So as silly as it may seem, it was a relief to me that she wrote those wishes down. And I've had some other family members in my life that have left us, and we didn't have those conversations beforehand, and it just certainly makes it much easier.
Yeah. And you think about the things that we prepare, and I know we're going to talk a bit about a will, but something like that really isn't typically in a will. And so where do you record these things? So let's put ourselves in the place of someone who has a chronic disease and can see it coming, as opposed to, a 30-year-old who dies in an automobile accident.
Right.
It's unlikely that a 30-year-old who died suddenly is going to have done much preparing. But let's say, a 67-year-old who has a number of chronic health issues, or just, you know, at the age of 67, if you're not thinking about preparing for death, you should be, even if it ends up being 30 years from now. What are some of the issues and or documents that it's good to have in place, or a notebook like your friend did to deal with some of the issues while we're still alive?
So I think you can use any notebook, right? You could write your thoughts and wishes down anywhere. You can write your passwords and your, you know, things that people may need to know about you anywhere you'd like. You need to tell someone where that book is, or it does no good. We do have a gift for anybody who's listening who does want something. We do have it's a My Will planning guide. That's free of charge, and we offer them from the foundation, and it's just a way to track your personal information. So that's one thing. They can reach out to me at MercyOne Des Moines Foundation, and we can send them one or more. Because remember, if you are a couple, you both need documents. That's the other thing that sometimes is a misnomer. You know, we've been married, my husband and I, 28 years. You both need a will. You both need your own documents. So that's important. There are documents such as, there's a document called the I-Post. And I think our palliative care team does a great job with sharing the I-Post. That document is more about what you would like at the end of your life, how you want to be comfortable, how you want to be cared for. Those are important conversations to have as well.
Yes. And there are also software programs and organizations. I mean, one that I happen to use is called Breadcrumbs, and it's a way where you store all this information that's held in the cloud, and you all have some professional also have the ability, or a family member have the ability to access it then after you die. But it's also useful when you're alive, because you can store in that your birth certificate, your passport, things that you, no matter where you are in the world, if you lose something, as long as you have access to the internet, you can get into that software that stores all of those things. And included in that software, like the notebook you showed, are prompts that invite you to share your wishes about end of life, about funeral, about what songs, about the pallbearer, about, you know, what to do with your remains afterwards. So there are kind of software solutions for that as well.
You know, another alternative too, I know that many funeral homes are also going to more digital. And while it may not store some of the things that you spoke about, you can actually make your funeral plans and include information that might be helpful in writing an obituary right on the funeral home's website. So they can be a great resource as well.
Okay. And what about the actual will? When's a good time to make a will? And what's the purpose of a will?
So really, anyone over the age of 18 can have a will. The definition is that it is a written, legally binding, but completely amendable document, which allows you to precisely direct who will receive and administer the property that you've accumulated over a lifetime. And I think the key there is for people to remember that it is completely amendable to do a will. So anyone over the age of 18 can have one, but it's highly unlikely. My 21-year-old and 19-year-old aren't ready to have a will at this point. However, I do think that significant life experiences and life events are times to think about a will. So if you've had a marriage, if you've had a child, you may want to think about having a will. If you, on the other hand, have had a divorce, it's important to think about redoing your will or having a will. So a death of a loved one might be a reason to have a will. So there's lots of reasons why and when we should have one.
And as you mentioned, you can change it whenever you want. And what you write in it, at the age of 40 is probably not going to be what's there at the age of 70, assuming you live long enough. So if somebody wants to start that process, how do you start? What's the first step to preparing a will?
So what we recommend is the first step is to take that financial inventory, so to speak, or the inventory in general of your assets to see what it is you're really considering in your will. So complete one of these booklets, and we have been told, and I actually did that for myself, completed one. When I went to our attorney's office, he said, "You've done all the work for me." So it really did reduce the number of hours we had to spend with our attorney. So I would say the first step is to start gathering data, gathering information, so that when you go to an attorney to work on a legal will, that you have all the information you need.
Okay.
And then we say the second step, if you have children, would be to consider a guardian for your minor children. So that comes with great responsibility, a great honor, but you need to ask the person. I mean, I don't really think it would be fair, Dr. Deming, if I listed you as a wonderful person to be the guardian of my children without consulting with you first. So I highly recommend having a conversation again with the person or people you are considering. And then at the same time, you need to have an alternate, because life can change quickly for many people. So it's not just about choosing one, it's about choosing two. And that's a difficult decision if you have children. It's hard enough to choose one person or one family to care for your minors, but to choose two is difficult. Then we say that you also need to consider an executor. And you need to ask that person as well, because being the executor of an estate is a long, sometimes painful process. Sometimes, it takes a long time. I've been, my friend who passed did not have a lot of assets, and it's been over a year and the estate is still not closed. So you have to ask someone. We often say, if you have a complicated financial portfolio or complicated assets, you may wish to ask the trust department of a bank to assist. It's not always something Joan should do. Sometimes it takes more than your neighbor or your brother or your mom or your dad. So the trust departments of banks are there for that reason. And it's really important that you maybe interview them and determine if they will assist you. At the same time, we say, again, choose an alternate just in case. So especially in the case of if you're not using a trust department of a bank, you should probably, or an attorney or someone that's going to help you, you should probably have an alternate. The next step is kind of a silly one, and it took me a while to get my arms around this. As you consider the beneficiaries of your estate, in my case, let's say it's my husband and then my children. The question that stumped me when I went to the attorney was, you have to determine who receives property if there's a simultaneous death. So what happens if my husband and I both pass at the same time? Because we both have our own will. His may say, leave his property to me and then to his siblings. Mine may say, leave my property to him and then my siblings. So you have to decide who goes first. If there would be, in a rare instance, you both pass at the same time, let's say in an accident. That one tripped me up when I was at the attorney's office, because you each hold assets in different names. So that one was interesting. Then, of course, you and I talked briefly, and you mentioned in the beginning, We need to consider our beneficiaries and also any charitable giving. You know, it's really important to me to make sure that the charities that I've supported in my lifetime, some of which I would consider part of my family here at MercyOne, my family at my church. I want to make sure that they are remembered also in my estate planning. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah. And Joan, let's shift to that. Let's just call it legacy. So
Mm-hmm.
we have things that we want to be remembered by when we pass, and some of it is the memories that we've left, the deeds that we've done in our lifetime. Sometimes it might be some writing. I mean, a book that you've written, a magazine article. It may be things that you've written privately that haven't been published, but that you want to share. And some of these notebooks and software allow the possibility to leave words of wisdom to those who survive you that might be part of your legacy. So that's important. Hopefully people interact with those they love while they're alive, and your memories are there, but it's also nice to be able to leave something in writing that passes on your philosophy, your wisdom, if you will, that people can then turn to. And then second is your financial assets. Um, Thinking about what happens, because if you die without having written anything down, your assets will be distributed. Um, the government will be a large recipient of your assets, and there's nothing totally wrong with that. The government does a lot of good things with the money, but if you have other individuals or charitable organizations that you would like to receive some of your financial estate, then making plans specifically for that is a good thing. And so at my age, it's like once a year I sit down with my advisors and modify and adjust. And sometimes organizations that are just really, really important to you at one point in your life become less important, and other organizations during the course of the year become important to you. And there are ways in which you can adjust your it can be done in instruments outside of a will. So there are many different
Mm-hmm.
ways. So maybe I'll have you comment some more about leaving a legacy, both in terms of the wisdom we want to share with others and our financial assets.
I'll go back to what a gift that will be to your loved ones to receive something in writing from you that shares your thoughts and words. People could also do it in the form of videos at some point. You know, we're in that digital world. So leaving that message, making sure someone knows where it is. I think that goes back to that conversation. Can you please have conversations with your family so that they know? They know how you feel. If you're not comfortable, many people are not, then write it, speak it, and share. I think there's great value in that, and those are gifts to treasure and pass on. And yes, leave your mark here on this world. As far as financial, you mentioned things outside of your will, and I think that's important for people to understand too. A will is not the only thing you need to be thinking about, because life insurance and charitable funds and all sorts of investments, stock investments, those are not managed by your will. So for you, Dr. Deming, to take time each year to look at that and to make sure that it's got the right names on it and it's the right organizations, that's exactly what we want to encourage people to do. Not to procrastinate, to set aside that day to take care of yourself and your family and your loved ones by doing such a task. And it shouldn't be as difficult as the task of doing our taxes. That's never, for me, that's never a fun one. I think taking time to reflect, I think that brings people joy. I think writing can be an expression of love. As I said, even having Dina's, whether it's typed or handwritten, when you find notes or receive something like that, it is a gift. And I will say that leaving gifts to charities that you love, it's my job, right? I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't talk about that just a little bit. But I can tell you that it seems each year or so we receive a fairly significant gift through a will or an estate. Those gifts make tremendous impact on the organizations that those individuals loved. And my one wish, many times my one wish is that even if I don't know the dollar amount, I would love it if a donor who plans to give to our charity would tell us so that we can thank them and tell them that we plan to be good stewards and make an impact with what they've worked so hard to earn throughout their lifetime. Because I've seen transformational gifts happen from everyday people.
Yes, and to be able to know them and know what their interest is and how you can accept and utilize the gift in a way that elevates their spirit and really meets the goals and desires and serves programs that meant a lot to them. Yeah.
Yes, yes. My desire is always to take and document as much as I can so that when those gifts come, if they come not documented well, that it's clear that we've had conversations and we know what their wishes are. And sometimes we have to rely on family members. And so we will visit with a family member to say, what did your mother love? What did your brother enjoy? So that those legacy gifts go to something very meaningful.
Great. We touched a little bit on some terms, advanced directives. You talked about the I-post, which also includes things like do not resuscitate or to speak more broadly, how we do want to be taken care of. Maybe I think we have time to go back to that and talk a little bit more here in the hospital setting where many ill people come and where we often recognize individuals who have an incurable illness and have had a lot of hospitalizations. How do you begin a conversation with the patient and the family about goals and expectations, and how does that then drive the conversation about the way you want to be cared for?
I think there are many ways. I think at the hospital, when you're here, they give us lots of opportunities to at least start the discussion, because I think every time I come, I'm asked if I have a living will or advanced directives, which I do, and I have on file here at the hospital. So that's good. Starting that conversation with your family needs to happen, preferably before you get to that point, because there are difficult things happening all around you. I remember the day that my mother-in-law was being transferred from Fort Dodge to hospice in Pocahontas. And they, as they are leaving, they asked if we wanted her to be DNR. Well, what does that mean? It's shocking to a family member to think that in the 45-minute drive from one town to the next, that she may not be there when we get there, and how do you make that sudden decision. So of course, at that time, what was right for our family was, no, we want you to do everything in your power to make sure she gets there and we can meet her there. But having those conversations before you're put on the spot is important.
Yeah, before the emotions are so enhanced that it's difficult to think straight. And then, as you mentioned, it's often done as a family. And what's so important is if the individual, while they are still healthy and of sound mind, can clearly articulate to the family, you know, when I get to the point that that I'm not really thinking clearly and there's not much left, please let me go peacefully. And so when they hear that over and over in conversations around the family, it makes it so much easier for the loved ones once the individual with the illness may no longer be able to cognitively speak or make sense, and then it falls on the family. And for them to have heard from their loved one their desire to have a peaceful passing can make it so much easier.
Absolutely. And you know, the living will document, that one is one that really does focus on life supporting treatments. So again, completed, you know, in advance of your illness. It's a legal document, so it does need to be signed and notarized. And as you said, you should be of sound mind and health when you make those decisions. Many people consider their faith and religious beliefs in the decisions that they're making. So I think that's important. And those documents help our healthcare workers here as well know how to guide and help family members during those difficult times. The DNR, the do not resuscitate, that's almost like a prescription, right, Dr. Deming? That has to come from a physician. That's not something that you can just say, this is what I want. It actually has to be signed.
Yes, you're right. And it's an order. So if someone's in the hospital, the default is that full code, and a physician can write the order to have a lesser degree of resuscitation, and that is done in conjunction with the family and consultation. And so there are the full code where chest compressions and artificial breathing and ventilation, but then there are other degrees of, you know, let's do antibiotics and medications, but if the heart stops and the breathing stops, we don't want chest compressions and artificial ventilation. So there's different degrees of it, and knowing what the family desires, and it's in most of those situations, even if you did a full-on resuscitation, you're not likely to have a successful resuscitation. And if the underlying illness is incurable, you really have gained minutes or hours, but not of a life that has much richness or ability for communication. So a lot of times it ends up causing more trauma to both the patient and the family in those situations where someone is near the end of life with an incurable disease. But it's always best to be able to sit down with the family. And for most families where mom and dad or grandpa and grandma have, you know, clearly stated that having a peaceful death is a good thing. You know, we all have a finite time on earth, and there comes a time where a peaceful death after a long life is sad, but not a tragedy. It's part of the script that we all have in our hands.
Agreed. There were a few other documents that you might be asked about or you might hear. One of them would be the durable power of attorney for healthcare. That's another document where Um, I was my friend Dina's durable power, which meant that when she was not able to make decisions for herself, she had completed this document in advance. I had carried it with me. The hospital had a copy of it. And then I was able to make decisions for her, which sometimes were difficult. When she went on a ventilator, and I thought she could understand, and I think she could, but it was a hard decision knowing that when they put that ventilator on, I might be faced with another difficult decision later. Her outcome was positive. I'm happy to report on that, but be sure that when you are asking loved ones or family members that they know what that durable power of attorney for healthcare means. The other piece of that is you learn very quickly when you are a durable power of any type of attorney. A durable power of attorney does end at death. So when I was at the funeral home and I said, well, here are my documents. I have durable power of financial attorney, you know, sharing my documents. He says, none of that matters anymore because that is only for your lifetime. And those documents also are amendable and can be changed.
Yes. So tonight we've had a conversation about how to approach thinking about our own end of life and how to prepare our family and make sure that our wishes are met. And then we also talked about the importance of leaving a legacy, and that legacy is both the wisdom that we impart through our lifetime and taking some special time to actually document some wisdom that we want shared after our passing. And as you pointed out, in this digital age, that can be done with documents, pieces of paper. It can be done with photographs. It can be done with videos that we leave. And then we also covered leaving a legacy in terms of what we would like some of our financial assets to do after we're gone to help leave a legacy and support individuals and organizations that we feel strongly are deserving of our philanthropy.
Right. Here in the foundation, we don't provide legal advice, but we do provide consultation. So any individual patient, family member out there who would like some help on trying to figure out how to start those conversations or where to start is more than welcome to call us here at the MercyOne Des Moines Foundation and let us know that they could use some help. And we're happy to brainstorm with them and help them set aside time, anything that it takes to start planning for their future and to leave their legacy.
Great. Well, Joan, I want to thank you for being our guest tonight. I've enjoyed our conversation. And we're going to bring Chris back on. And Chris, if you have any additional questions, or and I'll turn it over to you.
Now I don't see any. I don't see any in the question and answer or in the chat. But very informative. Those were terms that get thrown around a lot and are difficult sometimes to comprehend all the facets that they include. So that was very informative. Absolutely sure.
Well, I want to wish everyone a happy new year. Take time in the next few days to reflect back on all that this year has brought. Some riches that have come to us look a lot like they were miseries and face masks and difficulties, but I assure you that if you reflect, you can find joy mixed and mingled with those. And Chris, I'll turn it over to you to do our official exit.
Sure. These are one of the things that we've changed over the course of the year, as these cancer education series are now brought to you via Zoom. Obviously, we know that everyone who's plugged in this evening, but we're also able to record them and put them on our YouTube page with Above and Beyond Cancer, and they also appear on the MercyOne website under the Cancer Education Series. If you search for that, they're easily popped up and well organized. So they will be on very quickly, as will this one. And then we'll do this again next Wednesday, even though it will be a new year.
All right.
New topics.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joan, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Good night.